such good shit!
Hey, it's Mark Rodriguez here. Another episode of the Diving Cutter podcast here. And with me we have...
Rikki Roxx, the God of Thunder, Lord of Rock and Roll. Thanks for having me once again on the Diving Cutter podcast. This one ought to be a lot of fun. They always are, but I've got a real excitement for this one today.
Yeah, this one is especially made for Rikki Roxx on his interest. It was a very good idea. We decided to just go along with it. But we also have a newcomer today. We've kind of, I guess, not really hinted because I didn't expect him to actually join us, but I did mention him a couple of times here and there. He is the awesome artist Ninja Panda 1980 that has been drawing several Street Fighter cross AEW pictures, and of course the biggest thing that we talked in the last episode was that the picture he drew of Hikaru Shida versus Chun-Li was so epic that Hikaru Shida herself commented on it and she loved it. So here we have the man himself.
Hey, what's up, guys? How's it going today, man?
Hey, we're glad to have you, man. And
that's awesome too, man. That's awesome that she plucked that out and gave it some attention. That's really cool.
Thanks a lot, man. Like, it caught me by surprise too. I'm just really happy about it, and I'm ready to keep the ball rolling on it.
Now, of course, another interesting thing that happened is that shortly after that, Nyla Rose herself set her sights on our guy here and also liked the picture and everything. So, whoa, you better not disappoint her because the native beast is coming for you, boy.
Yeah, I know. The pressure is on. Like, I don't want to screw up the next one and, like, have my leg folded in my back pocket. So, rest on that one to make sure we got something good going.
So anyways, for today's topic, we're not talking about any particular pay-per-view or anything. We do know that there's been a couple around, but we mostly do the AEW ones. We'll eventually branch out, but I mean, God, we'll be doing one every day if we go to the other pay-per-views. One thing I do want to mention is, of course, the latest news with Zelina Vega being let go by WWE. If you guys got any random thoughts on that?
Well, I was there for some of her very first matches ever. A little over 10 years ago, or right around 10 years ago. I worked for a company called, first it was National Wrestling Superstars, and then National Pro Wrestling Superstars, because it was like an ownership split, but it was an offshoot of the old NWA New Jersey territory. And back then, she was just coming up, and she had just got done training, or was still training. She was working as Davina Fly. I had to look that up because I couldn't even remember her old gimmick name. But she was sweet, real tiny. I couldn't believe when I saw her. I was like, this one's gonna wrestle? She's real small, but she had everything it took. And then less than a year later, she was on Impact. So that was really cool to see. She had one of the fastest shots I'd ever seen between somebody working in front of 100 people in a high school gym to being on TV, less than a year. But she had the look, she could talk, she could move and all that, so I wasn't really surprised that much. It's just usually it doesn't happen that fast, right? She's changed the name and the gimmick so many times I kind of lost track at some point. I don't really follow WWE at all, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that she'd be put on the block for this whole social media Twitch thing that they're trying to enforce now. Apparently it wasn't a surprise. People were saying if anybody was going to get fired over it, it'd be her because she's really outspoken about it. But I got to figure she'll be okay. 90 days, and then come February, I'd be shocked if she didn't show up in AEW, where it seems like they'd actually probably have more hands off, just let her do what she wants with that whole thing. If she's making a lot of money from it, like some people like Paige supposedly are, thousands of dollars a month and this and that, then I gotta feel like she'll be fine, It is what it is, but I'm sure she'll be fine, one way or the other.
Yeah, I actually agree with you there. That whole social media debacle it's kind of a really bad mess, and I don't even see why it even, to be honest with you, it even exists or it is a problem as far as WWE. But as far as Zelina Vega goes, yeah, I see her in the next few months probably popping up on AEW, and those guys are pretty laid back, so I see those social media channels probably popping back up in even bigger aspect, and they're not going to bother about it. I mean, you've got guys like Kenny Omega who, even show up on other people's, live streams because he's constantly doing stuff on Up Up Down Down with Xavier Woods. So, apparently it's not a big deal to them. But, yeah, I think she'll have a lot more freedom as a wrestler and both doing the social media deal in AEW. I just, hope she makes that jump. But other than that, I think she'll be okay.
And the speculation is that what specifically got her in trouble, again, this is speculation, was more the OnlyFans than her Twitch and this and that, which to a point I kind of understand. Because let's be honest, historically, WWE has made a lot of money about having their girls pose in outfits and lingerie and whatever and then marketing it. And so now with the internet, these people are eliminating the middleman, right? And making 100% profit for doing stuff that historically Vince would do a whole big deal about. As I understand it, she's only done like bikini stuff at worst. And she's not doing like certain people's OnlyFans, which is pretty much like softcore, whatever. But you got to know Vince, you got to figure he doesn't. I would be shocked if Vince ever even used the internet. He probably doesn't understand what it is. So somebody probably told him like, hey, OnlyFans is like a softcore porn kind of thing. And do you know that some of your people are on it? And he probably threw a fit about that. I could believe that. Again, it's all speculation, but either way, those shoots with the the bikinis and the lingerie and things like that used to be huge. He used to sell DVDs of just that, right? Divas Uncensored and whatnot. So I kind of can see him being annoyed that they found ways to eliminate the middleman. Like, we should be making money on this. But at the end of the day, it's nitpicky bullshit. I mean, he's always found ways to reach into people's pockets, and he always will. So even though I get it, I don't like it, and I think that it's an overreach. I said this on the last time the conversation came up about this current social media ban or whatever in WWE. I felt like there's much better ways it could have been handled. They could have had meetings. They could have had actual conversations instead of just this sweeping edict and then I'm going to start firing people and blah, blah, blah. He's an idiot.
Yeah, that's I totally agree with you on that one. And like you said, he's just pretty much, he's not making that diva money anymore. And, with sites like OnlyFans and even like Patreon and YouTube, it's supposedly hurting his pocket, which I think is like very contradictive of him, considering, he's pulling the whole PG era where, he's trying to pull away from the divas and all this other stuff. So then when they do it, it's a no fly. And then, to start firing people or, causing issues for that because they're making their own personal gain, especially as independent contracted wrestlers, it's not a good look for Vince at all. Like, he's shooting himself in the foot as far as, like, getting new talent that isn't, like, super desperate at this point.
Yeah.
And that's what it's going to turn to. Like, especially now when you have, AEW and other wrestling promotions that are growing bigger by the minute, it's, a lot of wrestlers are starting to realize, hey, you can make that big time without Vince. And that's starting to be a big wake-up call for him.
Yeah, I definitely think things are shifting a little bit as far as all that goes, definitely. I mean, the workers nowadays are more social media savvy than ever. Like, I shit you not, 10 years ago when I had my first match, a lot of guys didn't even have a YouTube. They didn't even have somebody recording their matches for them, which is huge. Like, if you're on the indies, that's how you get noticed. Like, you have to have YouTube. You have to have a social media presence. I only ever got Facebook because of wrestling. I didn't want to have anything to do with any of that. But guys were like, dude, you can't just show up at shows and expect that that's going to get you booked. You have to do all these things. You have to have a YouTube channel. You have to have matches. You have to have promos. You have to have little skits. You've got to be on Facebook. You've got to put yourself out there. Otherwise, nobody's going to know or care who you are, and, the train's going to pass you by. So little by little, now everybody's got YouTube. Now you're an idiot if you don't, like, completely. It's shifted so far in 10 years to the point where they have, kind of getting into what today's topic is, they have, websites on social media of wrestlers just playing video games. and streaming it and everything, and they're making money on it. 10 years ago, you told somebody that would even be a thing, they would have laughed at you. But it just goes to show you how far things have changed, and when these kind of things happen, you either figure out how to get in front of it or you get run over by it. And it seems like Vince, like with many things, doesn't seem to know how to get in front of these kind of things until it's way too late.
And yeah, that brings us to today's topic. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about wrestling video games, some of our personal favorites, or maybe not favorites, whatever. It'll be all games, new and old, Nintendo to, I guess, PS4, anything in between, not necessarily WWE-related games, could be any wrestling game ever. And we're just going to talk to memories and stuff like that. So that's kind of cool. And I imagine this was Rikki Roxx's idea. You probably got a decent collection.
Oh, absolutely. I've got many. There's many I don't have. She's not in the room right now, but I picked up a couple things for my girl for Christmas that are going to be pretty cool. Some import stuff that I didn't have. I do have most wrestling games that came out in this country across all systems, but there's still a few Japanese ones that I'm slowly accumulating because I never had the means to play them. So, but yeah, huge wrestling game fan going way back. There was times when I haven't even really been a fan of the product of wrestling itself, but I always played the games. Like, that was always a constant my whole life. Sometimes I couldn't even stand to look at what was on the TV, and I'd go years without watching it, but I always played the games. That never stopped.
Yeah, the exact same thing. And I had been playing this type of game since early, like, Nintendo years. So, I agree with you there. Like, even after I had stopped watching wrestling, surely enough, you go over to a friend's house, hey, they're playing, like, Fire Pro, or... which was actually cool, because that warped my mind, like, the first time I ever saw it, because we actually got it as an import. Or, they'd be playing something like No Mercy. First major one I really got into was PS1 WCW versus the World.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Oh, we're going to talk about that, believe me.
Oh, yeah. That was, like, my first one, and, like, I kind of ended up getting caught up with them on that ever since. So, yeah, we're going to have some fun with this one.
Oh, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Mark, where's your background into this? I think yours is a little bit different from mine, but I'm curious.
Oh, God. Well, I mean, like, for me, they didn't get good until we played Super WrestleMania. And it was kind of funny, though, because... okay, the first one we played was WrestleMania for Nintendo. And that game, oh god. Oh god, that game was terrible. But we were trying to get into it because I had these guys, but we were so confused because we didn't know nothing about these people. We had like Bam Bam Bigelow. I mean, we just knew Hogan because, again, Hogan was everywhere. But we didn't know like who DiBiase was, who Bam Bam was, any of them guys. They're just running around. And we did not know at this time... because, from my understanding, I think the music was just looping in general. Like, it didn't follow who was in the ring. It just played everyone's theme.
What it would do is, first, when the match started for WrestleMania NES, they'd play a MIDI version of Stand Back from Pile Driver, the Wrestling Album 2. They'd play that first, and then it would bounce back and forth between the theme music of the two guys who were in the ring. One thing that kind of threw it off was that Andre didn't have theme music, so the music in the game would also be Stand Back. So, but yeah, they played the guy's music in the game. It was just very MIDI synthesized kind of thing.
Yeah, of course.
My memories of that game are a little bit more fond than some, just because I played it a lot as a kid. There weren't a lot of options.
Well, I was gonna say one thing though. Again, we were super new to all that. So my brother and I were confused, like, why the fuck are they playing the graduation theme? What? And we didn't know. Like, yeah, obviously, yeah, everyone knows it's fucking Macho Man's theme, which also reminds me, why? You get this wild, crazy, I guess he's supposed to be a cowboy character with the, ooh, yeah, top of the heap, cream of the crop. Like, where do you get graduation music? How do you think that would be a theme?
I'm not sure he ever even explained it. I always did kind of wonder that, but yeah, I don't know if there's ever been a good explanation given. I'm sure there was at some point, but I missed it.
Well, from what I knew, from back in the day, there was a wrestler that had that as his theme music, and was this wrestler named The Genius. He actually would come out in a cap and gown, and like when they introduced the Macho Man, they played his music by mistake. So they were just like, well, you know what, we can't really turn back on it, so screw it, you're stuck with it.
Well, I don't know where you heard that story, and I can't really be accurate, because the Genius character came way later on, although Lanny Poffo, that's his brother, Leaping Lanny Poffo was the Genius. They were brought in as part of a deal because Savage was, him and his family, I'll keep the story brief, they were kind of part of an outlaw territory down in Tennessee when they started. Outlaw territory is basically what happens when nobody will book you. You start your own company, you book yourself. And his dad, Angelo, started this outlaw territory to run against Lawler. And everywhere Randy went, he took Lanny with him. That was his thing, So when he got signed to Vince, he's like, you got to bring Lanny too and give him something to do. And Savage, they debuted around the same time. Savage came in as himself, and he already had the music. Lanny came in as Leaping Lanny Poffo, who originally had no gimmick other than he still did the poetry, except he read poems off the back of Frisbees, which he then flung into the crowd. He was a babyface jobber character. Then they gave him a suit of armor for some reason, of which I don't think has ever adequately been explained. And then they took him off TV for a while and brought him back as the Genius in '89. But they were both already there from '86. And Savage came in with the music. And the Genius never had music. So he didn't even wrestle that long before they took him off the road and made him a manager. So yeah, I don't know where that urban legend got started, but it's unequivocally untrue. But just putting that to bed. Sorry.
Oh, you're totally good, and you're right about the urban legend thing, because, I mean, look, this was something that, was just a bunch of me and old school friends talking about, like, years ago at school, so...
Yeah, Lanny never even had theme music, because not everybody had music until '91. That's the first time everybody needed to have music. But, like, even if you go through some of the older Royal Rumbles, they would play music for the guys who came out when they had music, but if they didn't have music, they would just walk out. So, like, it was kind of weird up until the '91 Rumble, and then after that, everybody had to have music. It's so weird, right? You imagine, like, that should have been a thing immediately, but it took, like, 10 years to catch on. Some guys just never had music.
So, Andre never had music throughout his entire career?
No, he never had music. They would always, either he would just walk out, or it would be a thing like WrestleMania 6 with him and Haku. They would cut to them already standing in the ring with the tag belts or whatever. But no, Andre never actually had theme music.
And that's so weird, because, like, so many video games, when you select them and stuff, like, he's given some theme of sorts.
Yeah, they make stuff up for him. The Giant, though, in WCW, he only sparingly ever had music all the way through his entire run. When he was with the NWO, he came out with their music. Before that, when he was in the Dungeon of Doom, he came out to the Dungeon of Doom theme music. But when he was on his own as a babyface, he almost never had music. Once in a while, like 2 or 3 times, the Giant came out when he was a babyface, and he had like a version of the Dungeon of Doom theme music without the Kevin Sullivan laughter at the beginning of it, and it would just be like the spooky music. But he only used it a couple times, and it was weird because he'd be like coming out to wrestle for the world title, and he would just walk out with no theme song, and it was just kind of weird. And this is all the way up through 1998. By then, it was very weird for a guy not to have music, but
wow,
I don't know. That was just part of the gimmick.
So one thing I remembered was one day, because, back in the day, you had stores that would rent video games, and rent videos and stuff like that. Blockbuster was always too far for us, but we had a couple of local ones nearby. So we rented Super WrestleMania, because it just came out around that period. But we also rented WWF Challenge or WrestleMania Challenge, whatever. And, like, it was such a weird contrast because I remember that WrestleMania Challenge had more like fun modes, and the characters they felt they had a bit of differences to them. The heavier guys felt heavier. Not everyone could just pick up Andre. Everyone had a different variation of when they jump off the rope. Some might do elbows, some might do knees or whatever. They all had their different things. And like when we played Super WrestleMania, like the first time, like I don't know, I imagine it's like us as kids back in the '90s looking at that would be like kids today looking at like the most modern, 2K17, whatever the fuck, because the music just felt real. The themes were, I mean, they were close. Some of them were like Undertaker's was like real close and stuff like that,
Yeah.
and the graphics for that time, they just look realistic. It even had like Bobby Heenan in the background and whatever and all that shit. But after playing it for a bit, after you kind of realize, okay, well, they all play exactly the same. And it's kind of boring.
Yeah.
It's whatever. So we went back to the Nintendo game and played that one for the rest of the night until whenever. Because I forgot, I think back then that store was like running for a day or 2 days or some shit.
I remember, because I had all those games. I remember when Super WrestleMania was advertised. Like, a lot of people have even seen the cover of Nintendo Power with Hogan dropping the leg on Earthquake and he's holding the Super Nintendo controller. It's like an iconic image. We were all so excited for it, and the graphics and everything like that. And I think it's a good game, as in it's something you could play for a couple minutes and have fun with. But like you said, it was in its own way real disappointing on the sense that nobody had finishers. Everybody had the exact same moves. The graphics were great. The sound was great. The sprites were huge on our little TV. Just these wrestlers took up a third of the screen. It was like, wow, this is great. But after a couple of minutes, it's like, well, you really can't do anything. You had to use your imagination a little bit. Like, Undertaker would do a body slam, and it's like, well, we'll pretend that's the tombstone because he kind of picked them up the same. Everybody had an elbow off the top, so with Savage, you just beat a guy with that. But it was like, okay, interesting foundation, but a year later when Royal Rumble came out, that was like the revelation.
Yeah.
And to speak to WrestleMania Challenge, yeah, I remember that being a huge improvement over the first NES WrestleMania game when that came out. Still wasn't fantastic, but like you said, there was individuality to all the wrestlers. They had a good roster for that, too. They had Hogan, Warrior, Beefcake, Andre,
Big Boss Man, Ravishing Rick Rude.
Man. Yeah, and they all had, most of them anyway, had some version of one of their big moves. Rude had the Rude Awakening. Beefcake did the sweeper. I remember everybody used to always pick Beefcake so they could cheese the sweeper hold. Because if the other guy didn't know how to break it by hitting left and right real fast, you could just walk up to somebody and put them in the sleeper with Beefcake, and you'd win the match in 5 seconds.
Oh God!
It was cool. There was just little problems with it, like little nitpicky stuff. Like Hogan didn't have the leg drop, but Beefcake did. It's like, what? Hogan would just drop an elbow. That didn't make sense.
Well, speaking of which, speaking of people dropping elbows, we do have a ninja here, another ninja that snuck into the chat.
Right on.
Hey guys. Hi.
Hey, welcome back.
Thank you. So, how is everyone today?
Oh, it's going. We're just rapping about wrestling games from times past and beyond, so we're doing pretty good so far.
Yes, and we also have a new person on the phone, on the chat here in the Discord, whatever, named Ninja Panda 1980. He's a totally cool artist. He's drawing stuff like Street Fighter versus AEW, and that's pretty impressive.
Hey, how's it going?
Oh, I'm doing okay. Nice to meet you.
Sweet, you too.
So what I'm curious about, and let's go around the room with this, what was everybody's first wrestling game that they played, and we can jump off of that.
Alright, so my first one, and to me, I always thought it was like just horrible. It was the Tecmo Pro Wrestling for the NES.
Really?
Yep, that was my very first one.
Because we're going to have to talk about that, because it's definitely, my opinion is much different, but let's hear it.
Well, I mean, like, back then I was a kid, I used to rent it from this one video store that we had here that, for some ungodly reason, I don't know whether it was just against the religion of the store or what have you, but they just did not believe in putting instruction manuals in the box. So, I would rent this game and just, I do find, and then there was this one character named Starman.
That was in pro wrestling, totally different game.
Okay, it wasn't that one. I think I ran pro wrestling a little bit later. But it was this one character that I just remember every time I would just get just completely wrecked by this guy, and I had no way of figuring it out. Like, as soon as somebody put me in a pin, I just pretty much quit the game, because it was that bad without like the instruction manual or trying to figure out what I was doing. That was my first one.
Now, I'll speak on this briefly because I ended up playing that game, Tecmo World Wrestling, and here's my perspective on that. That's secretly the best wrestling game on the NES, but it's hard. You need to know the instructions. You need to know how to play it because it's unmerciful. Like, that game will beat your ass into the ground. But what was so great about it, compared to every other game on the NES that tried to be a wrestling game, was you had all the moves. Like, any moves that anybody had ever done in wrestling, that game had them. You had the announcer at the bottom of the screen calling the action, which was really cool. You had training mini games in between the matches where you'd get stronger. Like, you had to win matches and win the training mini games to be able to beat some of these guys in the first place. First time I ever played it, it took me like an hour to beat the first guy. Like, it's a hard game, but one of the coolest things is when you guys are down to like your last little sliver of health and you start hitting the big moves, the camera would zoom in on the screen and you get like a little anime cutscene of doing the finisher. And there were so many moves that would line up with that. So you got these awesome cinematics for the gorilla press and the giant swing and the torture rack. Like, they'd show the guy jumping up in the air with the guy on his back, and it was like so amazing.
That was a Nintendo game or Super Nintendo or what?
It was for NES. It's called Tecmo World Wrestling. Look it up on YouTube. It's secretly the best wrestling game on the NES, but it's very hard. I've never beaten it. I've gotten to the last guy, the final boss. Once you win the title, there's this cutscene where the lights go out, and this guy in a mask called Blue Demon or Demon King or something. I can't remember. It's one of those. But he's got like this fright mask on, and he says, "I'm undefeated. I'm the real champion, and I challenge you." And I've gotten him down to low health, but I can't beat him because he's just merciless. It is the hardest wrestling game I've ever played. But when you figure it out, it's so much fun. Like, I don't even care if I win or lose because I just have fun playing the game. Point of fact, that game was the first time I ever saw moves like a Northern Light suplex or the Royal Octopus hold that Inoki uses. Because like a lot of wrestling games, they had like fake versions of real people. Like Stan Hansen's in it, kind of, but he's got a fake name, and Vader, and, they're all like reworked and fake names and this and that. Antonio Inoki, guys like that. So in that way, it's sort of like Fire Pro, because they put real people in, but they'd fake their name and say, like, this guy, Stan Hansen, instead of from Texas, he's from Russia, whatever. But you could tell it's them because of the moves they would do. And I'd never seen a Northern White suplex or a giant swing or an octopus hold or, and so that video game, which I played in like 91, that was an introduction to more of a Japanese style of wrestling. Because that game was from Japan originally and had a different name in Japan, I think. I can't remember. And I think the people might have had their real names. Don't quote me on that, though. But yeah, it's hard, though. If you don't know what you're doing, that game probably seems like it's lousy because that game will fucking murder you. But I've had a lot of fun with it. And I only ended up playing it by accident. I went to a game store, and there was 2 wrestling games for sale. The other one was Tag Team Wrestling, which we all know now is pretty notoriously crappy. And for some reason, the vendor was trying to push that game, Tag Team Wrestling, on me. And point of fact, I actually have the box for Tecmo in my hand right now. And it jumped off the shelf at me because it's this blue box with gold lettering. And the artwork, it's just a fantastic painted artwork of like a fake Ricky Steamboat putting fake Road Warrior Animal in a headlock. And it's beautiful. And I says, nah, I'm going to get this game. and that's the one that I took home, and I played it. I played it again a couple weeks ago. Actually, I dust it off every now and then because it's good. It's just really hard. If you don't know how to play it, you got to look up how to play it. But hey, man, not a bad pick to get us started, though. I mean, I don't. If that was anybody's first wrestling game, that surprises me. But good for you, man.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, it was that exact cover that was what drew me into it. So, because
So
at
beautiful.
the time, yeah, and at the time I was, a huge Ricky the Dragon Steamboat fan, and I'm looking at this cover, and I'm like, that dude looks like Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. All right, I'm in. So I'll go ahead and rent this one. But yeah, no instruction manual. It was a nightmare. I got smoked like every other move I did. So I was just like, you know what, I give up on this one. But now that you said that, and with the way things are online now, I'll definitely go ahead and download a manual and try to give it another go.
It plays a lot like Fire Pro. It's just the timing is a lot more demanding. Like, you have no time to pull this move off. You're either going to do it or you're not. And you have, like, a fraction of a second. It plays like that. It plays like playing Fire Pro on hard mode. But it's playable. You got to figure it out. I love those cutscenes of the finishers, though, man. I love them. When the guy jumps up 20 feet in the air for the power bomb. Oh, God. My heart.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Mark, you got to check this game out, dude. Mark,
the little cutscenes were awesome. Like, even though I was getting my butt kicked, like, I'd still just kind of like sit back and watch it for those. So I mean, yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Like, the cutscenes were a very nice touch on that game.
so dramatic. And Tom Talker, the announcer on the back, he got him with the back brain kick. It's doomsday for the skull. I'm like, oh man, you got an announcer in an NES game calling the action. That's so sweet.
Yeah, I'm curious. I gotta check that out. We have a retro game store that sells old stuff that I'm surprised it's still around. I thought it was gonna go out of business due to all this stuff shutting stuff down, but I think it's still open. I'll give it a see if it happens to be there, and if it's not some insane price. Because you get lucky. Sometimes you get games that you think would cost quite a bit, but the guy doesn't know, so it'll be like 10,
Yeah.
$20.
Exactly. Jupi, what was your first wrestling game?
For me, this is actually a tough one because I'm trying very hard to remember what game I was playing. It could have either been, well, I don't think it was WWF Super WrestleMania. I'm pretty sure it was not that because Yokozuna wasn't in that game. But I think it was, my first game was the WWF Royal Rumble for the SNES. And the reason my memory of it is very hazy is because it wasn't my game. It was my older cousin's. And when he and his younger sister had to stay here over the summer, he brought some games with him, and that was one of them. And I really, really enjoyed playing it with him, at that time. But, I never owned any games of my own. So that's why my memory is a little bit hazy with it. I remember the sprites and everything. I knew all the characters. And it was right about the time, like, when Raw was pretty much starting up. So that kind of got me. Oh, and that also really got me into watching Raw on a regular basis because he came during the summer, and I was finally allowed to watch Raw because it was summer. So I watched more than I played.
That's such a good game, though.
Yeah, now
I remember it was fun.
For me, Royal Rumble was perfect because at that time, like, now I was watching wrestling. They had a wrestling show every Saturday morning or so. Like, I guess it was like the first show that aired after all the cartoons ended. And, I mean, mostly it was just taking down jobbers. And then it would, keep advertising the pay-per-view. And, I'll see you at WrestleMania and all that shit. And, we were big fans of Razor. When Razor appeared, we were, like, super big fans of Razor. Like, me and this cool dude in high school were talking about Razor and The Undertaker and Papa Shango and all that shit. So when that game came out, that was, like, the first game that had Razor in it. And, Yokozuna and Crush. And it just felt more modern. Like, the only guy in the game that I think wasn't really wrestling at that time was just Ric Flair. But everybody else was actually, like, in the ring at that time. You would see Crush and them on TV, and you could just pick them, like, when the show's over. And that was one of those games that we were like, like, counting the days for the release date and saving up money, and then like today's the day it's out, we fucking ran out to the store to buy it, and we were just playing the shit out of it, and yeah, like since it played like Super WrestleMania, we just jumped right in, and it had finishers, so we were trying to do all the finishers, we were trying to do the Royal Rumble and win, and I mean, I don't know, the game was always pretty easy. It would always end up being, you two guys, the human players. It would be rare that the computer would take one of us out before we got to the end. But it was so much fun though.
Here's a trivia question. I don't think anybody's gonna answer it, so it's gonna lead me into a humble brag. What's the fastest time a person can possibly get on winning the Royal Rumble for for WWF Royal Rumble on Super Nintendo? What's the fastest you can win the Rumble in that game?
Oh my gosh. The memory is hazy.
I don't know, a few minutes, I guess. Just toss everyone out the moment they come in or some shit.
1 minute, 1 second. I achieved this in 1994 with the narcissist Lex Luger. The game has to decide that it's going to play along with you, because all I did, swear to God, match started, I just backed up to the ropes, the guy ran at me, hip tossed him. Moved to the other side of the ring, second guy ran in, he charged right at me, hip tossed him. All I did was go to opposite sides of the ring every time I charged somebody out, and if they don't run at you the second they come in, you can't do it. But this one time, that's all that happened, and it was no struggle at all. 1 minute, 1 second. You cannot beat it any faster than that.
Oh, wow.
But it requires a little bit of luck, because sometimes they don't charge at you. You can't, like, recreate that experience. It just sort of has to happen.
Wow.
Because if they decide that they don't want to run and they just kind of walk around, then you got to go chase them. But I was like, what the hell, man? I couldn't believe I did it so fast.
Oh, jeez. Have you played...
It was so good. It took everything good about Super WrestleMania, and it added the finishers, and, it really... The only thing I didn't really... The roster being split for the Super Nintendo and the Genesis kind of annoyed me, because I wanted to play as Hulk Hogan, and I didn't have a Genesis, so...
Yeah, but the Genesis came out, like, sometime later, I think.
Yeah, they usually had, like, a 1 year, or... They always had a limited kind of restricted release, like games would come out on Super Nintendo first, and they couldn't come out on the Genesis for a little while, like up to a year after the fact. Point of fact, like Super WrestleMania came out for Genesis with a different roster, and oh god, well, we'll probably get into like later on worst wrestling games, but that one was up there. Super WrestleMania for the Genesis is a piece of shit. I tried playing that one again not that long ago. Garbage, unplayable. Horrible game.
Oh god. Have you played Royal Rumble, Ninja Panda?
Royal Rumble, that one I actually missed out on. Actually, I'm gonna be brutally honest with you. Like, after the Tecmo debacle, I kind of avoided wrestling games right up until Super Nintendo, and then even then, the one wrestling game that I played the two wrestling games that I played at the time were more arcadey than they were like more wrestling based, because the main two wrestling games that I played at that time was WrestleMania the arcade game and Saturday Night Slam Masters.
I was hoping somebody would bring that game up. Oh my god.
Which one, Slam Masters or WWE Arcade?
Oh yeah. Talk about a game I love that I'm not even any good at. Because that game kicks my ass. But
that's one game I haven't played. I've been wanting to play it, and I haven't. I wonder if it's a game I can get that doesn't cost like a fucking, $500,000 or some bullshit.
I see it every now and then for kind of cheap. It's funny, too, because I was just playing Final Fight for Super Nintendo, and, like, Slam Masters has Hagar, or however you pronounce it, from Final Fight. He's one of the playable characters in Saturday Night Slam Masters. So, it's and of course it's all the Capcom universe, which incorporates Street Fighter as well and all that. I love Saturday Night Slam Masters. I'm just no good at it. Like, it's hard, but it's so. I love the presentation of it, man. Thank you for bringing that game up. We got to come back to that one.
Oh, definitely. As a matter of fact, I was talking to somebody about it last night. Like, the one thing that really attracted to me was the art style. It's actually the same guys that did a anime, like a really violent anime back in the day called Fist of the North Star. And it's the same artist that did that game. And yeah, once I got on that one, I was hooked. We have a store here in Savannah that they had it pretty cheap. I think it was like maybe 15, $20. The one
I'm seeing it right now for about 25 to 40, depending. Right now,
Yeah.
I'm looking.
On Amazon or where?
I'm just checking the old eBay.
Yeah, the one that's really gonna cost you. There was a part 2 to it, but it never got released to the States. So
Yep.
that one's gonna be a pretty penny.
Yeah, it's weird too because some import wrestling games are really cheap, and some like that are more obscure, and like people don't really know about them, and everybody who wants a copy has a copy, and they don't want to get rid of it. So yeah, the sequel game is pretty tough to come by. They made Slam Masters for Genesis too, but they switched out I think the Battle Royal mode. They switched it to a hardcore match with barbed wire. Oh God, you gotta play Slam Masters, man. Even though it's hard, like it's so beautiful. It's got that Capcom art style with those big beefy sprites, and they're just zipping all over the place doing fighting game special moves in a wrestling ring. It's so badass. I love that game. I suck at it, but
Well, that was an
I love
arcade,
that
though. That's why, too. It was an arcade, so they were trying their very best to replicate those arcade graphics.
Yeah, which they did in spades. Like, oh man, I'm so glad you brought it up, Ninja, because that was one of the most memorable wrestling games I ever played.
I just don't remember if Part 2 was in the arcade as well, or if it was another one of those, made up sequels, like how Final Fight 2 and 3 were just made up,
No, there was arcade sequels for Slam Masters, or Muscle Bomber as it was called.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. There was a Muscle Bomber 2, but like it only like I said, it was Japan only. We had like this one arcade called Game Cave out here back in the day. Somehow they managed to get a copy. And good luck on reading the instructions if you didn't know Japanese. But if you'd already played the first one, then this one was right up your alley. And they had like actual regular finishers, super finishers, different background stages, and the sprites were actually a lot bigger, surprisingly enough. So yeah, it was pretty awesome.
That's the kind of. I remember I was at there was a video store over by where I lived, a little mom and pop called Dayton Video, and I just happened to be out looking for a game to rent, and I'd rented Royal Rumble and Raw 100 times. So I was just kind of looking for something different. And all of a sudden, I just saw the cover with this comic book looking art, and I was like, oh, I gotta try this game. And then you take it home, and you got the guy, the Hulk Hogan ripoff, tearing his shirt. And I was like, what? This game is awesome. So, yeah, definitely.
Biff Brannigan, I think, was his name.
I know everybody had different names in Japan than they did here, so it gets a little confusing.
Yeah, I think the only one that had their name stuck was Gunlock, because he's actually supposed to be the brother of Guile from Street Fighter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Hagar is the same guy. He had the same name. Everybody else had different names.
Yeah, that's true. I thought it was cool, though, because like, he had that kind of a Jesse Ventura entrance where he came out with the big boa on his neck.
Oh, such a cool game, man. Them Japanese companies, they really, really knew how to add the pomp and circumstance to the wrestling video games. Like, there's a lot that I don't have. Like I was saying, a little bit, I'm hoping we'll talk a little more about, like, import games and stuff from Japan. But when I don't have a Super Famicom, but I will get one day, specifically because I have a list of, like, there's like 20-something wrestling games that only came out in Japan for the Super Famicom. Not just the Fire Pros.
I have a Super Famicom.
You are so lucky. because I want to play stuff like Shin Nippon, because they had like 3 or 4 Shin Nippon Pro Wrestling games, and they've got like the real people and.
Wait, you said Shin Nippon?
Yeah.
Oh, so that means New Japan. Nice.
Yeah. So you live there, or you've been there, so you know. I have this list. I'm looking at it right now, and there's like so many titles that came out for the Super Famicom: All Girl Wrestling Ultimate Angels.
Oh wow.
Astral Bout. Fire Pro Joshi All Star Dream Slam.
Did they actually play good? I'm gonna actually search some of those. I got a Super Famicom converter I bought a couple of years back. It almost looks like half a Super Nintendo cart. You just pop the Japanese game on it and just pop it into your Super Nintendo and it plays.
Wait. There is a way where you can use a US Super Nintendo to run Super Famicom games.
Yeah, I know, but you gotta...
Yeah, it's just you have to mod it a little bit. You have to get, like, a pair of pliers, and you have to, like, clip 2 little, like, the ends. You have to, like, clip some on the inside so that the cart would fit. And then that's how you can mod it.
Yeah, but that's the thing, though. I don't like... and I've heard everyone's told me that, but I just don't like to do that. I break my things, you know? I hate breaking my stuff. So
I'm real authentic too, so like eventually I am gonna get a Super Famicom. But to answer your question, like I've watched videos on YouTube of like I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation, but like the Shin Nippon wrestling games, those look fantastic.
Dude, you're gonna have to send me some links or some YouTube videos, because as long as they don't cost, you know, some crazy fucking ass price, I might get some. Because
you'd be shocked. I've seen some of these on eBay for around $20.
I wish I would have known this, like, you know, when I was still living there. You guys could have given me a list, and I probably could have gone to, like, any, like, retro store, because, I mean, there's, like, if you, like, go to Tokyo, there are, like, quite a few stores that sell, like, old games and stuff. I mean, I found a Virtual Boy. I found me some Game & Watch stuff. And, you know, that's pretty awesome for a person that like the retro thing. And there's also a Knock on Broadway, which is like perfect if you're a nerd, a dork, a geek, all of the above, which I am. And they have like all these old things that they sell there, especially game systems. So and games.
I wish I would have known, because I have a list right now. I have a list of 30 Japanese wrestling games from Shin Nippon to there's like 6 or 7 Fire Pros. And Mark, you know, the last time I checked, most of these were under $30. Some of them as low as 10.
Wow.
For whatever reason, I mean, even if you collect Saturn games, for example, a lot of games came out over here and in Japan, and a lot of people are like, dude, if you don't care about the text menus or whatever being in Japanese, most games it's just easier to get the Japanese version because they're a lot cheaper. I'm not sure exactly why.
But do you have to, like, mod them or something? Or how do you make them work in the American Saturn?
It depends.
You can mod it.
And for, like, a Saturn, if you have an Action Replay cartridge, they're like $40. If you have an Action Replay cart for your Saturn, they'll play import games.
I used to use Action Replay for my PS2.
See,
yeah, we
that's
had
my
a
problem.
Action Replay for our Saturn, because that's how we got to play Darkstalkers, but in Japan it was known as Vampire Savior.
Yes. And there's a lot of cool games for PlayStation 2 that I want to get as well, but unfortunately you got to have like a modded PS2, I think, and they're getting a little harder to find.
Yes, you do. It's annoying. I never could get my Japanese games to play. I could get it to play Region 2 or Japanese DVDs, but I could not get it to mod it enough to play the Japanese games that I did want to play on it.
Yeah, like there's I'm looking at the PS2 import list I got. There's All-Star Pro Wrestling, King of Colosseum. I really want to play King of Colosseum and Wrestle Kingdom. Maybe one day. It's just when I go online to look for a modded PS2 that plays Japanese games, they're harder to find now, because what people are doing instead is they're just like modding them to have a hard drive with a bunch of games preloaded on them, and they charge you like $500. I'm not really looking for that. But even just a regular PS2 with a region free mod is going to be like $200, which isn't too bad, but it's more than I want to spend right now. So Yeah, we'll see. Maybe one day.
They even had this super badass like Fist of the North Star fighting game that for whatever fuck reason never made it to America. I think it's on the PS2.
Maybe because the show itself wasn't popular here, honestly. I forgot the Japanese name of it. I just know, I remember some of the characters, and I remember what some of it meant, but... And I've never even seen the show myself, except when I was living over there, and I caught a rerun of it once. It just wasn't very popular outside of Japan.
That could be. It took a little longer to catch on over here, I think, because I don't even remember hearing about it till a certain point.
I remember hearing about it in the early 90s, and the PS2 one, oh dear, it was called like Hakuno Ken Fighting Generation. It was something weird like that.
That's it. Hakuno no Ken. No Ken like means like for punch or whatever, or hand or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it literally devises back to Fist. It's literally Fist of the North Star.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I know it. You know, I couldn't think of the Japanese name, but yeah, that was it.
But yeah, I know the one he's talking about. There was actually, I think if that's the one, it's either that one or there was the one on PS3. But it was done by the same guys that did Guilty Gear, and I saw a video on it, and just the combos that you could do on there are just insane. I'm looking at the video, I'm like, somebody's got like an octopus for a hand. They have to, because like you're doing like 50 million inputs in midair. It's ridiculous.
Oh man, did we get Mark on the first wrestling game he ever played, Angle, or did we skip over him?
I mean, the first ones I played, not counting the NES one, was the arcade ones, once or twice. I don't know what they were called. I know one was called Steel Cage or something, and those, I don't know, do you remember those two WWF arcade games?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. There was WWF Superstars was the first one.
Yeah, that one.
And then after that, 2 years later, they had WrestleFest, which is a little bit better. But, you know, one was an 80s style and one was centered around the Federation of 91. So it was kind of like a generational thing.
I just remember, like, $1 Million Man grabbing you and the announcer, "It's the $1 Million Dream," and all that. And
yeah, that was Superstars. That was the first one, which I'm a little partial to because I'm more of a fan of that 80s style wrestling. They had Andre and Hacksaw and DiBiase and Savage. But, you know, WrestleFest had a great roster, too. And WrestleFest honestly plays better, and it's a lot brighter. And they tweaked it a little bit to be a little bit more fair. So
those are ones.
Better game. I like both of them a lot.
Those are ones that I wish would get adapted. They never got adapted. Like if someone told me, like, hey Mark, they got, you know, WWE Superstars or WF whatever on PSN right now for like $20, like fuck, I'll buy it today. Like shit.
That's the problem with a lot of these licensed arcade games, though, is like, you know, because of the licensing issues, they're never going to be. I mean, look how long it took to get the Simpsons game ported over to be able to play on consoles. And that was like a really popular arcade game. But with wrestlers, too, you got like specific guys, personas that are licensed for the game. So games like WrestleFest and Superstars, they're never going to be adapted. The best you're going to have to do with that is just to play it on an emulator, which I do from time to time. Those are definitely great games, though, for sure.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I remember pumping so many quarters in. That's the only thing that was kind of sucky about them, though, is that, like, you know, when you got towards the end, especially WrestleFest, when you fought Legion of Doom, they had double health bar, and they could hit their finish on you at any time. So it was such a quarter muncher. You basically just had to pay to win. If you had less than $10, you weren't beating WrestleFest. I was like playing it on the emulator. You just hit the enter key and, you know, infinite health. My first wrestling game was actually, it's kind of boring, but it was pro wrestling on the NES. Starman, King Slender, the Amazon, all those guys. It blew my mind, actually, how that game came out first. But it was so much better than the WWF WrestleMania game that came out like 2 years later. Because like you play pro wrestling, and you had all these moves, and all these different move sets for different guys, and you could jump out of the ring and all that kind of stuff, and it's so much fun. And then playing WrestleMania, which I don't hate that game like a lot of people do. It's just, it's so simple. Like you punch and you kick and that's it. And it was such a letdown. You know what I mean? compared to pro wrestling or just about anything else. It was like, how were they able to get the WWF license? I guess they blew all their money on the license, and then they just didn't have anything left over to make a good game. There was like 4 NES wrestling games from WWF. There was WrestleMania. There was WrestleMania Challenge, which was a little bit better. Steel Cage Challenge, which was not that great. And then
because hold on, Steel Cage Challenge was basically the NES version of Super WrestleMania. So you got stuck with the same shit. Everyone playing the same. The only advantage was the characters were a bit newer. You had IRS, you had the Mountie and all them, but it still played. Everyone played the same. Once you played the Steel Cage, because that was the only thing that it had that the SNES didn't have, you're still stuck with the boring guys. And then what really killed me is, like, the other games still had music, the characters, ran around, they were faster, but this one was trying so hard to copy a Super Nintendo game that everyone was slow response, no music, just that wannabe, 8-bit sounds that's supposed to replicate, like, an audience. Like, it was boring.
The animation was terrible, too. You'd do a body slam, and the guy would literally just, like, throw you halfway across the ring, and you just kind of float. Oh, terrible.
Yeah, we bought and we got rid of that
30
one.
seconds. I won matches in Steel Cage Challenge where you just body slammed the guy and climbed the cage and you won. Like 10-second matches. Like, oh, this is lousy. But then King of the Ring was even worse. Like, that game was horrible.
Yeah, I was always wanting to get it because I never actually saw it, but that was like the last NES game. But when I actually saw someone else play it or review it, I was like, holy shit, the graphics are fucking terrible. What happened?
My buddy brought...
Like Razor Ramon and all them, like, oh my god.
My buddy was like, dude, did you hear this game came out? Because we played every wrestling game we can get our hands on. And I was like, no, I didn't know they made King of the Ring. Well, he's like, yeah, you want to check it out? Because he'd played it already, and he didn't exactly know what to think of it. So I played it, and I was like, well, okay, you got Hogan, you got Razor, you got Narcissist, you got Mr. Perfect, you got an okay roster, but then you start playing the game, and it's like, oh my god, it's so ugly, and the animation was terrible, and I was like, dude, this game sucks. He's like, I thought so, I just didn't know if it was just me. I'm like, no, it's not just you, this game is awful. It was really bad. I finished it, but I don't think I played it in 15 years. It's so bad. I might get it, like, if I see it for $5 because I collect games, I might pick it up for that, but I'll probably never fucking play it. Oh, God. That kind of gets me to another one. So we talked about first. Let's jump to the worst. What would you say would be the worst wrestling game you've ever played? Or it could be, like, objectively bad, or one that just pissed you off, or just whatever. But go nuts. What's the worst one?
Well, I mean, you already know what was my worst one, and again, that was pretty much the the video store's fault, because of the simple fact that I didn't get a manual, so I had no idea what the hell I was doing. So
I can't imagine playing that game without the manual.
Okay, so in your case, though, what about second worst or something? Something aside from that game, since we already know about your nightmare with that one.
There are a lot of bad wrestling games out there.
It was actually on the PlayStation. It was, oh dear, I think it was Backyard Wrestling.
Ooh, there's an interesting pick.
Was that like WWF related or just on its own or whatever?
That's the one. That's the one. It was the one with the Insane Clown Posse on it, but it was just called Backyard Wrestling.
Was that what do you call it? Outlaw mud show shit?
They did 2 of them. Sabu was in them.
Oh, that actual guy's in them. I thought it was just like made up or.
There was a couple real people in it. Sabu was like, he was working for the Insane Clown Posse's Wrestling Federation at that time, so like he kind of backdoored his way into it somehow. But it was mostly fake people, I think.
So
those were pretty
some
bad.
Of them were fake. Some of them I did kind of look like 1 or 2 of them up, and they were just only known due to the fact that they were backyard wrestlers, because this was around the time when the internet was starting to bud. So they'd actually have videos on the website showing some of these wrestlers. But yeah, that game was just like, it was the cheap dollar store, badly graphic Kmart version of No Mercy. It was horrible.
Yeah, I never played them, so I always like hearing about stuff I'm not intimately familiar with. They don't look too good. I'll say that. They don't look too good.
Yeah, and the thing is, I kind of shot myself in the foot twice because I had like a old PlayStation magazine, I believe, and it had a demo with, it had a demo with it on there. And I'm like, okay, this is a work in progress, so it might not be, might get a little bit better the second time out. And then when that game actually came out and I rented it, like, a game's bad when Blockbuster gives you 5 nights and you immediately walk back the first night and take it. No, but yeah, I was going to say, it was that bad. Like, I had 3 more games that I rented, kept the other 3, but that one I immediately walked back across, like, 4 miles from my house and dropped that thing off.
Those were 2 of the rare ones that came out in this country that I never bought. Just never had any interest.
For me, I was disappointed with WCW Thunder. I was really hoping it was a better game. I mean, I love the title screen. I love the characters all taking turns talking and, having, smart talk. And even Nash was like, hey, man, don't look at me. Like, go, move the cursor. Choose someone else. Go. Or whatever.
That was like the best part of Nitro and Thunder was the character select screen.
Yeah, and then you actually played a game. And yeah, we were disappointed. It looked like crap. It played like crap. I don't know. I tried. I still own it. And God help me, I gotta try and play it because I want to review it someday. It's just I have to actually fucking play it. But oh God. Like every time I try, one match and I'm done.
I remember, because, when you talk about the Nitro and Thunder is 9/10 the same game. Thunder has a little bit better roster, but I remember when Nitro came out. I was a huge reader of the magazines back then. I read all the video game magazines I could get my hands on, and especially if wrestling games were coming out. Like if a magazine even had one screenshot of a wrestling game that was going to come out, I'd buy the magazine just so I could stare at that article and that screenshot. And the graphics in the magazines for Nitro looked pretty cool. And I assumed mistakenly that because I was a big fan of WCW vs. the World, I thought it was going to play like that, but it was going to have like digitized graphics that looked more realistic. And I remember going to KB Toys at the mall and standing in line, and I bought the game and the strategy guide and took it home, and oh man, it was very underwhelming. I played it, but I went right back to the other games after a couple of days because they were just a lot more fun. And then Thunder, I thought, well, it's been a year, maybe they'll do better now. They sped up the engine a little bit, which was good because when you play Nitro, everybody kind of feels like they're underwater, especially if there's more than 2 guys on the screen. But then Thunder, they kind of overcompensated and they had everybody on fast forward. And they put that stupid test of strength thing in there where you can win a match in 5 seconds. You just test the strength, spam the button, and then body slam a guy. It was like, it was broken. That was definitely one of the most apt video games where I could think of when some people say this game is just broken. Nitro and Thunder definitely fit that for sure.
Oh man, and I was disappointed because we were watching Thunder. We were actually watching Thunder at that time because it was on a channel that was an American channel. Well, it was on TNT. We had TNT in Mexico. Like the legit English American TNT. So we were watching Thunder. So when they announced that coming soon WCW Thunder for your PS or whatever, and we were like, holy shit, it's gonna be fucking awesome! And it's got all the people and it was during the time of the NWO Red and Black and Wolfpack, and then you also had like Raven's Flock and all them. So we were like so pumped up and hyped. And apparently the game had so many characters. Granted, some of the hidden ones played like the ones in the game, but it had almost everyone in it that we followed at the time. And then you, like I said, you actually play the game, and then
There
Wait,
some
what
interesting
game you guys
ideas.
talking about? Sorry.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Yeah, I had a power surge and the net went out. Back again.
We were talking about WCW Thunder for PlayStation, but specifically we were talking about the worst wrestling games that each of us have played. So that's how that game came up, because that one's not very well received by many.
Oh, it was based on Thursday Night Thunder, right?
Yeah, which it was also a sequel to the PlayStation Nitro game, which also was not very good.
And then, like, my understanding was that they shot themselves in the foot with, like we didn't know. We thought Thunder was awesome. At least my brother and I did. But, like, I found out, like, the fall of WCW wasn't the whole thing that they got a bunch of guys from WWE to go to WCW for a lighter schedule. But, hey, now we got another TV show for you guys to wrestle. So they got stuck with the same demanding schedule, right?
Well, I mean, the thing of Thunder in brief, the whole what started that show. I'll keep this as brief as I possibly can. But Turner Corporate, when TNT was getting such big ratings with Nitro, TBS, their sister station, which had been around longer, they were jealous. The TBS executives wanted their own wrestling.
Oh, that's what we had. We had TBS, not TNT. Because I remember we didn't have Nitro in Mexico. We had Thunder. So that's what we had. Okay.
And TBS had been around longer, and it was aired in more parts of the world than TNT. So Turner Corporate went to Eric Bischoff, and they said, well, now you have to do a second show. There was a lot of problems with this, because first of all, TNT, the network, was paying for Nitro to be produced every week. WCW didn't pay a dime for the set, the pyro. TNT paid for all of that out of Turner Corporate. But Thunder, TBS wasn't going to pay for it. That show came out of WCW's budget. So right away...
Oh my God, are you serious?
Yeah, they didn't want to do it. And Bischoff...
That explains so much. Because I'm serious, because I used to... my friend and I, we used to actually watch Thursday night. We used to watch WCW Thursday Night Thunder, and we always talked about... Like the effects and some things were like so bad. Even the trash cans look like something we could have made ourselves that they used to use. I mean, everything.
They had like a blue tint lighting sometimes. It looked cheap compared to Nitro.
Yes,
yeah,
okay, that explains so much.
Yeah, Bischoff went to them and he said, "Look, we don't have the money and the budget to do this show." And as Mark said, a lot of the guys were under guaranteed contracts. They only had to work a certain amount of dates per year. And the first month or so on Thunder, you had Hogan, Nash, Hall, all them guys, Sting. But then once Thunder had been on for like 2 months, a lot of these guys were just like, yeah, I'm not working Thunder. You can't make me work Thunder. It's not in my contract. When I negotiated this contract, Thunder as a show didn't exist. You only needed me to work twice a week, and now you're telling me I got to work 3 days a week. I don't feel like it. So then you ended up with Goldberg versus Reese would be your Thunder main event, because Goldberg wasn't that big. He was the champ, but he wasn't a big name yet. And he was the lowest paid top guy they had because they signed him in a lowball deal right out of the power plant. So he wasn't making even $1 million a year up until after he won the belt. It wasn't until after he was the champion that he renegotiated and got a much bigger deal. But because he wasn't getting paid a lot of money and he didn't have a big ego, he'd work Thunder, but Hogan wouldn't work Thunder, and Sting and Savage and then, didn't really like working Thunder. Brett worked it sometimes just because he had nothing else to do and he was sick of sitting at home. So he's like, fine, I'll come in and do stupid Thunder. But, they hated it. Nobody wanted to even do that show, but it was just a Turner Corporate thing. They're like, well, we need a show on TBS, and there you go.
The only one I actually kind of remember now that I'm thinking back, aside from, like you said, Goldberg, seems like I mostly remember Norman Smiley.
He was a mainstay on Thunder. But, yeah, so what was your worst memory of a wrestling game that you played?
Oh, me?
Yeah, you were up next, but we lost you before.
Oh, I honestly couldn't tell you because, like I said, I haven't played so many, and the ones that I played, like I said, my memories are a little hazy on them. I mean, the only other wrestling games that I have played is WCW versus NWO and WWF WrestleMania 2000. And they're both in N64.
Good ones. Mark.
But I don't remember them being bad.
Nah, they're really good. Those were some of the better ones. I'll rattle off a few real quick lightning round, because I'll say most wrestling games I've played I can get some kind of enjoyment out of, but there's some that absolutely I think were terrible. I'll try to go chronologically. WWF King of the Ring for NES. Horrible fucking game. Terrible game. No good at all. We talked about Thunder. Backstage Assault, WCW Backstage Assault is a really bad game. I don't understand how it came out so bad, because it was a sequel to Mayhem, which wasn't that bad. Like, that was after THQ jumped to making WWF games. Because they did a few for WCW, they did World Tour, and then they did Revenge, which is one of the best. But then THQ jumped to making WWF games, so they made WrestleMania 2000 and, of course, No Mercy, which is the king as far as many people are concerned. But so then EA got the WCW license, and they made a game called Mayhem, which was okay. Wasn't that great, but it was a good first try. I don't know if anybody here's played it, but most people who've played it say, it was okay, a sequel could have been better. But then the sequel was Backstage Assault, and that game was fucking horrible. Like, the graphics are terrible. It plays like they're in mud. It's just really bad on every level. It's just it's ugly. It's clunky. I don't know necessarily if that's the worst one I've ever played, but it's definitely up there. I would say the worst ever, though, for me. It's not even really technically a wrestling game, but it's got wrestling in the title. Simpsons Wrestling. That is one of the worst things I've ever touched. I would rather play Backstage Assault than that. I would rather play King of the Ring than that. That game was horrible.
Who of all was in it in terms of, like, Simpsons characters and whatever?
I mean, pretty much all the main ones. I'm going from memory here. I didn't even play it that long. I played it once for like a half hour at the most. I played through it. It was just like a weird button masher. It was definitely, they cheaped it out. You could tell somebody made this thing in like a week. It barely worked. My memories of it are fuzzy, but they're all bad. There's very few games that I won't at least try to play for a while. I played that for like a half hour. I'm like, I'm never touching this again. This is just garbage. I would have fucking, if I hadn't, if I had the means to, if it was something where it was mine and I could get away with it, I would have friggin' snapped the thing in half or a million pieces. That's what it deserved.
You're gonna go all AVGN on it.
It was horrible. Yeah, definitely. If any game ever deserved it, it was Simpsons Wrestling. I'm surprised he hasn't reviewed that yet on the old Video Game Nerd channel. There's one for him. Ugh. Ugh. Dog shit. But yeah, so we covered...
But tell us how you really feel.
Well, let's talk about some obscure stuff now. Like, we all talk about, and we will talk about some of the gems, but what are some games that either you hadn't heard of that maybe you played that surprised you, or games that you like that are maybe ones nobody ever really heard of, or, you know, because obviously we'll talk more about like the No Mercies and things like that, but let's talk about obscure stuff. Ninja, lead us off there with that. You already talked about Backyard Wrestling, which is pretty obscure.
Yeah, you know what? I never really played too many obscure ones. I actually got to play Wrestle Kingdom not too long ago at a friend's house.
I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous.
Yeah, that one I got to play, and man, I enjoyed the heck out of that one. It was so insane. I loved it.
I want to play Wrestle Kingdom. I really want to play that game so bad. Oh,
yeah,
man.
I played it and I got hooked. Like, I'll go over there and, like, my friend Davis will be like, want to play a wrestling game? I'm like, you already know what I want to play. Just go ahead and boot it up. Just do it.
What does it control like? What does it feel like? Is it comparable to anything we would know?
It's actually kind of a weird mixture. Like, the timing is Fire Pro, but, like, the actual actions, it's got a bit of a, it's got a bit of that Aki system, like, No Mercy and WCW versus the World feel. But you got, like, a bit more of a timing system to it.
I'm definitely intrigued. I gotta get a modded PS2. I gotta play this game. I think they did one for Xbox 360 as well, but only in Japan. Jupi, anything obscure? I mean, I know maybe not, but you lived over there. I mean, you had access to all those games that we could only hope to play.
Jupi had access to all the waifus. And she refused to share them with us. How dare you?
How selfish.
Uh-oh, did we lose her again?
I think the waifus got her.